All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and thank you for joining us to wrap up Social Connection Awareness Week in Wisconsin. My name is Suzanne Morley. I'm a Health Promotion Program Coordinator for the Wisconsin Institute for Healthy Aging and coordinator of the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connection. Before we start, I would like to thank the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connections Awareness Committee for helping to plan this week's events and activities. And just a few housekeeping pieces. This webinar is being recorded, and an email will be sent out to all registered participants after the presentation. Please keep your cameras and microphones muted. You can keep your camera on if you'd like, but keep your microphone muted. And feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout the discussion today. Before we start, I'd love for everyone to just introduce yourself in the chat with just your name and a quick little icebreaker question of how do you connect with your neighbors? And while you all do that, I'm just going to briefly overview if you're not familiar with the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connection. Our coalition has been around since 2020, so about 5 years now. And our mission is to engage diverse partners in reimagining how we can combat the root causes and adverse consequences of social isolation and loneliness among older adults and people with disabilities in our state. So every year we celebrate Social Connection Awareness Week in Wisconsin, and we're super excited to support and celebrate social connection for older adults and people with disabilities and everyone in between. With that, I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. We have Damian Buckman, he's with the Ability Center, Denise Jess with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, Gerald Haight with Independence First, and Harlan Wiebesek with the Juneau County's Men's Shed. And our panel today is going to be moderated by Dan Crone, who is with TMG Wisconsin. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Nice to be here. Again, my name is Dan Crone, and I work for the TMG organization, and we are members of the coalition. So wonderful to support this conversation this morning. So I thought we would start by just going around doing some introductions of our panelists. So Damian, let's start with you. Do you want to just introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your organization?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Damian Bookman. I'm the founder and executive director of an organization called the Ability Center. To summarize it, we kind of say that we help people with disabilities play together with the people they love most, which also includes our senior population. And we do that through different adaptive sports and games. But I think for the purposes of this conversation, more in the space of community recreation and play and how everybody can be included in rec-related and park-related spaces.
Thanks, Damian. Denise, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be with you all this morning. Denise Jess, I'm the executive director with the Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired. We're proud to be coalition members as well. Our mission at the council is to promote the dignity and empowerment of the people of Wisconsin who are blind and low vision through advocacy, education, and vision services. And when you are someone who is blind or low vision, the circumstances of the world can make can make the world feel really small and enclosed and isolated. So much of the work we do, whether it's direct service, our advocacy work, and our education work, is really about connecting people and community so that people reduce that isolation and loneliness.
Wonderful. Thank you, Denise. Good morning, Harlan.
Good morning. Yes, I'm here to speak about the success of the Juneau County Men's Shed. It's a fantastic organization that I've been belonging to for about 2 years now. It's just helped an awful lot of people in our community.
Great, thank you. And good morning, Gerald.
Hi, morning. My name is Gerald Hay. I am the Director of Independent Living Services for Independence First. We are a center for independent living that serves the 4-county Metro Milwaukee area, and we provide 5 core services: advocacy, information and referral, peer support, independent living skills training, and transition diversion services, which really undergird this whole idea of keeping folks connected and able to participate in the community. So again, thank you so much for having us.
Great, thank you all. So we'll just go around and I'll ask, we'll just do a round robin of questions for each of you. So Damien, I'm going to start with you for the first question. So can you explain the universal community concept for people that are new to it?
Yeah, I think thank you for the question, Dan. I think this is a interesting space when I think about it. I don't know that there is a real universal community concept. What we know at the Ability Center is that, again, we found that people with disabilities love to play together with people and vice versa. And so what does that mean? I think in our experience, we've seen a lot of division, what I like to call, a disability hour or disability location. There's places where we take individuals with or impacted by disabilities versus saying, but they're a part of our collective community. So how do they continue to engage? So when I talked earlier about, what we do in park and rec kind of spaces is the idea is that, again, whether I'm tracking my thoughts here. We like to say that everybody deserves to play from K to gray, right? So from kindergarten until seniors. And we have also found that psychologically, while our mobility and abilities might change, our desires to do the things we love most don't necessarily change. They may grow, they may be different, but we still love the things we loved when we were kids. And I'm going to give you a great example. We transformed Bradford Beach here in Milwaukee into the country's most accessible beach. And some of the most comments we got and the most significant donations came from children of elderly parents who said, my mom or my dad loved the beach when we were growing up, and I can't wait to bring them back. We got more of those than we did from people who we were, saying we're building this to be accessible for those with disabilities. That's when it really hit me as our organization and the founder of the organization to say, how are we including seniors? And they are a part of this population that gets lumped into the disability population. And so now we're building a universally inclusive park. And so again, what does that mean? It means parks are for everybody. And you should be able to come when you're 8, and you should be able to play with your grandchildren when you're 80. And the grandparents of today, to me, are not the grandparents of yesteryear. The grandparents I see playing with my kids are active, want to be in the giggles, want to be in the play. Don't just, when I think about what did I do with my grandparents in a park, we sat on a bench and we fed the ducks bread, That's not where grandparents are now. So if we create an inclusive playground and in a universal park, we got to think, well, how do the grandparents continue to play with their grandchildren? Because at the end of the day, kids look back to all the adults who brought them, regardless of how many kids are there. Hey, grandma, hey, grandpa, look what I can do. Hey, mom and dad, look what I can do. And they want you to be in that. And I think that the grandparents want to be in that too, in the aging population. So from that perspective, that's really universal community to us, is thinking about the whole. It's applying universal design, if you will, to community, saying who is going to come in these spaces and what are all the different abilities that might be in those spaces. If you considered it a chart, on one line, who, on the other line, what do they need, and how do we make sure that they can be accessible for all? So at the end of the day, this idea of universal community is really just reinventing what we think. And I think the best way I can put that is that we all belong to one group of those that we call temporarily able-bodied, or TABs. And so eventually we're all going to need this greater access. And so how do we, again, think about whether it's disability or aging, how can I always continue to play and participate in my community?
Awesome. Thank you, Damien. I've personally been to the park, and it's going to be amazing. So, Denise, I'm going to give you the next question. So can you share, how does the work that the Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired, how does that help build social connections for people with low vision?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a great question. So we are a statewide organization. So as we think about what are our activities, we can certainly locally base them here in the Madison and Dane County area, and also how do we extend them statewide. So I'm going to start with a foundation that when someone loses sight, and our population of adults losing sight is growing significantly. It'll double by 2050 in the working age and older adult population, given the rise of diseases like diabetes, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. Those diseases cause vision loss. as does macular degeneration. So folks who had not previously experienced blindness or low vision will be walking into it, and many of us will either be those folks or know those folks. So when someone starts losing their sight, we want to work with them early on to develop skillfulness in how do they get out into their community, into the community. How are they still cooking the meals that they love? How are they able to communicate and use social media and email? You know, all of those things that connect us. When we can get out in our community, our world expands. When we can cook food for those who we love and who love us, there's that connection of sharing a meal together. And when we can email and do social media, manage a phone call, you know, we can reach out as we need to. And when you don't have those really basic skills and how to do them differently as you lose your sight, that's where it feels like you're caught in an isolation bubble. So skill building is critical. Peer support really is as well. So we have two online support groups, one that is open to anyone who is blind or low vision from across the state, and we've had some folks from outside the state as well, and that's our Trailblazers support group. And people call in for about an hour and a half monthly, and that's facilitated by one of our staff members. And it's very connective. They talk about everything from how do I keep gardening to how can I develop myself as an artist, to I'm really frustrated with trying to access the medical system. How do I do that? So there's a lot of peer support. Our other support group is geared for folks who are college and working age, so younger adults, because while they face the same issues that the wider population does of how do I stay connected, how do I keep doing the things that I love, there's unique things like when do I disclose that I have a disability in the job seeking process? How do I feel comfortable being potentially the only person with vision loss in my workplace? How do I do a presentation for sighted peers that rocks? So those two support groups, again, meet virtually so we can do that statewide outreach. Advocacy was really one of our foundations when our organization formed in 1952, because while individual work is critical, policy change is vital for removing barriers so that people can live with authenticity and dignity in our communities. So we have an advocacy discussion group that meets once every other month on a Wednesday afternoon. And those are folks that are grassroots advocates that want to connect with each other, share ideas, talk about how they can do mutual support to become advocates in their communities, doing things like increasing safer pedestrian access and making sure that businesses are accessible for people with disabilities and particularly people who are blind. A couple other things that I think really feed our social connection work is that we do things that allow people to interact across the human experience. So often, and I really appreciate the first speaker talking about the integration of people with disabilities. Often we, even if we're socializing, we're kind of marginalized in working with only other folks who have disabilities. And that's fine because there's peer connection within that. But sometimes there's also segregation within that. So a number of years ago, we worked with the then Madison Audubon Society, now Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, and a volunteer to develop our Birding by Ear program. And that really is for anyone who loves to be outdoors, who loves to bird. And we have folks who have a variety of disabilities attend those sessions. Folks who do not have any disability attend those sections, and there's beautiful mutual learning that happens within them. And we offer a virtual session for that as well. So folks can be on site at the Aldo Leopold Nature Center, birding together, and can join virtually and do some work together. And then the last thing I think I'll mention is that we sponsor an annual gallery night that features the work of artists who are blind and low vision from around the state. And this is an opportunity for you to showcase your work and to get fed energetically with people appreciating you for who you are as an artist. You're the center of our universe during that gallery night. And so often for people with disabilities, we're not seen as the center of people's universes. And so folks really get to show off their creativity and really be celebrated, both again in person at our gallery and virtually in our virtual gallery. So those I think are the things that come to me as a highlight of how we are supporting folks and finding their place in the world and really finding validation and value.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing, Denise. Some great connections being made. Harlan, I'm going to give you the next question. Can you share a bit about what attracted you to participate in the Men's Shed, and how did you learn about it? And can you share a bit about what made you want to go?
Yes, I came in contact with the Men's Shed through my daughter. I moved here a few years ago to be closer to family, to help with illness in the family. And she knew people here at the ADRC who have been helping with our Men's Shed. And it's been a fantastic place for me to go. I have met many new people. I've learned lots about the community from the sponsors and from the speeches that we have there every month. And there's always been a great time. I know when I started about October of 2 years ago, there was roughly 25 people coming to it. Last month we had 92. So it's been a great increase in our area. We've been doing a fantastic job. It's just been great for my mental and physical health because of the fact that there's connections. It's gotten me involved with quite a number of things here around the community. And as I said, I've met a lot of new people, and they have become close friends now. It's just been a wonderful situation.
Sounds fantastic. Susan shared in the chat that the Men's Shed is up in Juneau County. Unique collaboration between the ADRC of Eagle County, Juneau County office, and the Juneau County Land and Water Department, and the Outdoors Forever Conservation Club. Yeah, sounds wonderful. Thanks for sharing, Harlan.
And you muted yourself.
Of course I did. Sorry about that. Gerald, can you tell us about what independent living centers do and how they support people's independence and social connection?
Yeah, pretty
Good question.
expansive, that type of thing. So in addition to the core services that I mentioned, one of the things about the ILCs, so there are 8 independent living centers throughout the state. So all 72 counties are covered. So a little bit different model than the ADRCs, where they have an office in each of the counties. We have service areas. But really looking at that idea of being community-based and consumer controlled. So when we're talking about, whether it's social connection or accessibility or opportunity to participate, it's going to look different, So like here we have a consumer advocacy team who focuses on transportation issues. Well, in Milwaukee County, that's going to look different than it would up in Bayfield. So it's really important when we're talking about community connection that what's going on here, it really needs to be with the folks who are going to be involved. because it doesn't matter what Madison thinks, or it doesn't matter what, Milwaukee thinks if we're talking about rural, or if we recognize, like even here with the 4-county service area that we provide, where we have a lot of urban and suburban areas, but out in Washington County, that's a pretty rural setting. So a lot of these challenges, being able to be nimble and like listening to folks, but then also giving folks those opportunities to participate. So from my background and all that, it's really about access. It's accessibility, because there's a lot of things, just using Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee as an example, there are a lot of things to do here, but if they're not accessible, they don't do anybody a damn bit of good. So, when we're talking about integrated or, specialized groups or all that, give me a ramp, give me, that visual information, that navigation, that wayfinding thing. And then you don't have to build special programming. If we can do that, that's the ball game. So we're not having to fund, a special opera house or anything like that. Let's just work with the folks at Marcus, and we have making that accessible. So, that's a huge thing. As Denise mentioned, advocacy, helping folks empower, so one of our core services is, advocacy. But part of that we came about through the social justice movement in the, 60s, 70s. It's really, it isn't that your school has stairs, it's that it's preventing you from your right to an education or your polling place, that type of thing. So yes, architectural barriers do play a factor, but it's really looking at what are those opportunities or what are those rights, or helping people become that. Some of it is just educating folks to know what their rights are. So you can ask for these things. You do not have to be second class, or if somebody says, no, that's not what we do. Yeah, there's guidelines, that type of thing. So we're always talking to legislators, because accessibility doesn't happen in a vacuum. People need to be educated on how you can do things, or, whether it's disability etiquette, whether it's, compliance issues, but then it's also changing legislation, to get those things, as Damien mentioned, some of these projects with, the park that they're doing in Tosa requires funding, requires zoning, requires some of these things. So looking at those partners, but a large part of the work that we do with all of our services is disrupting this ability this attitude that people with disabilities don't do that. People with disabilities don't want to go to the beach. The hell they don't. Give them a mat, or give them an accessible power chair that can help them. So there's many different solutions, but it's just because, we don't see people with wheelchairs at Bradford. Well, now we do, but for these other things, it's if you don't build it, why would people come there? Or we don't employ people with disabilities. Well, what are you doing to, change that attitude? And that's all what about these things, or, with the, with the repair cafes, the he sheds and, those types of things. It's, if you give people the opportunity to participate and you make it accessible, people are going to show up. I didn't know that this was possible, or, we'll talk a little bit later on tech, but actually, kind of a funny coincidence of timing. Right now in our large employee break room, we have a group of folks who are blind and visually or low vision with our archery group. So we actually have folks with bows and arrows in our workroom, like right now. And it's one of those things, people who are blind aren't going to be able to do that, or don't want to, do archery. Yes, they do, because I got a bunch of rowdy ones here. And then we're also going to be launching that for folks with spinal cord injuries. People in wheelchairs can't, use a bow and arrow. Yeah, they can, so it's about, giving that opportunity, because who would have thunk about that? Who would have thought maybe this is something that we should offer? You don't know until you do it. You don't know until you make it accessible. And then e-gaming is another one of those, like where I don't play video games because I don't have the, grip grasp to hold a traditional controller. Well, we work with the VA on those types of things. Now we have adaptive controllers, and that's the thing. It's not about the accessibility or the accommodation. It's about, what do you want to do? Do you want a video game? Let's figure out a way that we can do that. But to not offer it because we don't think that we can or that we should is perilous. And that's how we get to isolation or disconnection, because we're not offering that. So ILCs, we're consumer controlled. Tell me what you want to do, and then let's go, because nobody should be able to, we can't do that. You're just not trying hard enough. So anyways, sorry to be fiery.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well said. Thank you. I did want to add that Susan put a link to Independence First in the chat, but she also put a link to the DHS Independent Living Center page where you can find your local independent living center in your area. She also put a link to Damien's Ability Center where you can learn more about the Moss Universal Park and all the other amazing programs Damien's doing as well. Damien, I'm going to come back around to you for the next question. Where would a community start, and what are the first steps in doing this?
Well, I got to say, Gerald just lit me up. Well done, Gerald. He couldn't be more right, and Denise was touching on it earlier. So I may touch on this question, Dan, or I may just go on a little bit of this collective rant as well, and I think what I'm about to say leans into what you said. Everything that Denise and Gerald talk about, or just spoke of too, is the same kind of thing we talk about. And we're getting to the point where we're helping the community understand that the problem isn't disability. The problem is design. Period. End of story. You can almost solve disability if we design better and understand we're all going to be there. We're all going to need it. And so we might as well do it up front. And whether we're talking programs or whether we're talking spaces, it really comes down to that piece of the design. And Gerald, as he was speaking of, it's not that people with disabilities don't want to do it. I can tell you, I gave that same speech to the Milwaukee County Parks when we were doing Bradford Beach. And I tell the story all the time to people is you would have thought we staged the entire morning when we cut the ribbon there, because everything we said would happen happened. It's not that you don't get people with disabilities or people with disabilities don't want to be there. It's that you're not accessible to the people with disabilities. So I'll just share with everybody. I mean, on the day we cut the ribbon at Bradford Beach, there was a family on powered unicycles that came down the path in the ramp. No disability required, no disability had, just it was accessible now for them to bring their powered unicycles down the mat. Kids on skateboards, person on a bicycle. We talked about bringing strollers and wagons down with your athletic equipment, your big coolers. That all happened in the moments we cut the ribbon at Bradford Beach. And suddenly eyes were open to understand why this work we were doing was so important. And I think that's one of the things we really love about putting things in community space. Again, I spoke earlier about disability location or disability hour, but what about just community collective space where everybody can be seen? And I think the importance and the value of that in building these spaces is that we see one another. We understand and start to see what people's abilities are. We don't start to other them or start to think they can't when we get to see them actually hit a home run on Universal Field, while on the typical baseball or softball field, someone else, who's quote unquote able-bodied is hitting a home run as well. Suddenly we realize what everyone is capable of. And I think that that's the really important thing that's going to start to break down those barriers, to see the person first, the human first, not the perceived, again, in air quotes, quote unquote, disability first. It's about seeing the person. So this conversation is just, we have to start changing minds and not, saying that disability is the problem. We've got to call out the fact that it's not disability, it's design that's the problem. And it's not about creating things for people with disabilities, it's creating universal community for everybody. And thinking from the day you might design or build a program or a space or architecture, how are we making sure everybody can access it? That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. And I'll close with this thought is that as we're all really talking about this, at the end of the day, none of us just serve the seniors or just serve people with disabilities. We serve everybody who comes with them. The disabled population is surrounded by able-bodied friends and family. And generally, I think we've been at the Ability Center helping consumers understand, or the businesses understand, is that if you can serve Timmy, Tommy, Sarah, or Sue, or, Dan, you and I in our space as having ambulatory disabilities, if you can serve us, well, you get our whole family. Well, then they're all coming too. And we're not the only consumer. Everybody around us in this is the consumer too. If you can't serve the child, if you can't serve grandma and grandpa, then you're not getting the collective. And one more note on that. We actually I got a text from the CEO of Visit Milwaukee, who was in a conference, and she texted me and said, I'm listening to a guy talk about if your community isn't thinking inclusion and accessibility, you are discluding 80% of the population. So at this point, there's a stat that says 80% of the population identifies in some way with disability. And that's because of, again, thinking about our aging population, thinking about people around us who have different mobility or ability needs. If you can't serve them, they're not visiting your town. They're not vacationing in your space. And you don't get access to, again, the collective whole of a family or community when you can't serve everybody. So I don't know if I answered your question at all, Dan, but Gerald fired me up and I was like, we just got to continue on this rant for people to really change the game and help them understand that. I think what I heard from Gerald and Denise is we're not just talking about the person with the disability we serve. We're talking about being a space and a place for all.
I think you answered my question and then some, Damien. I'm seeing a lot of head nods. Yeah, thank you. And I was personally at the ribbon cutting ceremony down at Bradford Beach, and it was an amazing day. Day I'll never forget. Great day. Denise, I'm going to give you the next question. And so would you, how do you recommend people with low vision get connected with resources or integrate into their communities throughout the state of Wisconsin?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and thanks for this discussion. It is excellent, and I just want to tap on that theme of creating universal design. And so I'll speak to your question, but I want to tap and pull on that thread a little bit more, and connect that to how do people get connected. Again, I think because our dominant society sees and still labels disability as something shameful, something sometimes a quality in someone's character, we as community leaders have to be responsible for changing that narrative. And the discussion that we're having today is part of that work. That disability is simply one of the ways that human beings show up in the world. And it is transient. At any point, any one of us can have a disability or more than one. I fully expect, as somebody who's, in my early 60s, to have a secondary disability at some point in my life. And that's just part of the human experience. So often, because we have this belief that disability is bad, that it's othering, that makes it so difficult for people to reach out because they're scared. They somehow think, people somehow think that they won't be accepted, that they'll be marginalized. And so people can sit for too long before connecting. And that's painful to me, that someone would be ashamed of who they are because of a change in their body. So I think the work really needs to be among our community to connect folks. I really want our service providers, folks in the aging community, our ADRCs, our AAAs, the places where particularly older adults hang out, to welcome people with vision loss head on and then help connect them with the resources, whether it's through us at the Wisconsin Council of the Blind or Visually Impaired. And Suzanne, thanks for putting the link in the chat. Whether it's through the Office for the Blind throughout the state, that's a state agency, or Vision Forward in the Milwaukee area. So often it becomes an unnamed thing. People know, they can see that someone is, struggling to see, and yet it doesn't get talked about. It's very taboo. And so let's collectively break the silence on it. And so we need our community partners to help shift that narrative, help start a conversation with someone, support them in getting connected to resources, and connected to their community. Refer them to one of the independent living centers. They can do some very, foundational things about helping get a magnifier into someone's hand, helping them to think about lighting. Let's break the taboo. I think there was a study done by the New York Times. It's a little older now, but it's still so incredibly poignant that when they surveyed thousands of people for some of their disability research, about 46% of the people surveyed said that they'd rather have cancer than vision loss. That is painful because it really speaks to the fact that our society still believes that when you cannot see, you are broken, that there is something significantly wrong. So when you cannot see, it simply means you find other ways of doing the things that you love. You do the advocacy work to create more universally accessible websites and spaces. And, you also get to really appreciate knowing the world in different ways. Being able to really taste food differently, smell, experience your senses as really rich tools. So shifting that narrative is critical. We can't just hand somebody a phone number and say, give them a call. But we can legitimize the experience of vision loss as not being the end of the road for someone. People used to call organizations like ours hospice care for the eyes. That's a narrative and a phrase I never want to hear again, because we are here to support someone on their journey, not to hold them while their vision leaves them. So thanks for the question.
Thank you, Denise. I like how you said that, shifting the narrative. You mentioned some great resources as well. Your ADRCs in your local communities are a great resource. You specifically mentioned Vision Forward in Milwaukee, great resource. So yeah, if people can always go, connect with those community resources to get some more information. Harlan, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with the Men's Shed and how that's helped you build connections, and how has it changed your outlook?
Well, yes, I can tell you more about my connections that I've built through the Men's Shed. Being there, I have been offered different places to go. I joined the Outdoors Forever Club here, and which met me more people, and have been involved with senior meals and with the sharing supper once a month here. All of them things have come from people that I have met at the Men's Shed, and it's just been, yes, great for my outlook. I mean, it's just been a boon for me, that through these connections in the Men's Shed that I have gotten involved with a number of things around the community here. I've even done a little volunteer work to help out on a few things just from having these connections. Was there anything else you need on that?
No, I think you answered my question. Thank you. Has it changed your outlook at all as far as community or connecting with others?
Yes, more positive, absolutely more positive outlook here in the community, because I can go down the street and meet people I know now. I was a complete outsider when I came here, and now it's just a total difference in my life.
It's fantastic. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Harlan. Gerald, how does assistive technology provide people with opportunities to be more connected and help them access their community?
I think one of the things, so like when we're talking about whether it's attitudinal or societal kind of views on that, obviously when we're talking about assistive technology, there's a connotation to it. What I really like to start off with is just reminding folks that all of us are technology users, so all technology should be assistive. There is no difference between somebody who is using a power mobility device and me using my car. I might drive over, just like 300 feet that way. I might bounce in. Well, I don't, but for the purposes of this example, I'll drive to McDonald's through the drive-through in my car, but then that's okay. But then when I see somebody who's using, or when folks see somebody who's using a piece of power equipment, oh, that's different, or they need that, or anything like that. We need to kind of get out of the headspace that technology or assistive technology is disability related, or, as Damien, we were kind of talking earlier about, good design works for everybody, because it might be, ambulation, but it also could be energy conservation. It could be that we're tool users. We don't think anything about people wearing glasses. Well, without these glasses, I'm not driving. I'm not doing the things that I'm doing. But we've normalized this, and the idea is with technology that it should be appreciating the tools, and not getting into a capitalist discussion or what you feel about the company. But one of the good things that they've done, so with Microsoft, and not talking about all the other stuff, but they have a design inclusion manual. And I thought that one of the coolest things about it was they have this, it's either on the front page or just inside of it, but they have a motto or a creed: solve for one, extend to many. And I think, like, when we're talking about building connection, you had asked Damien, where to get started and that type of thing. Look local, look with you and yours. Think about you as an 8-year-old. Think about you, your elders, or that type of thing. Start there, and then start building out that. If I wanted to do this with my loved ones, or if I wanted to do this for my family, with my family, looking at it from that place, and then extending out. And you start, okay, what about my neighbors? What about my neighborhood? What about my community? You can start building there, and it can be a lot of hard work. But if you start with the people that you're in the room with, it's a good place to start. Let's connect here, because we obviously live in a very real world where there's pressures and changes and all the other stuff that's going on. But you can start there. One of the things, like in our advocacy work, we'll meet with legislators who are sons of, I almost swore there, we're being recorded, but sons of guns, until they have a loved one, or that type of thing, or in the positive, that we disagree radically on all these other priorities, but their son or their spouse or they themselves have this disability, and we find these linkages. That's connection, and we can grow from there. In kind of understanding that until we have the conversations, until we have that exposure, until we're actually out there just doing it. So assistive technology can be that thing, because, we might have legacy buildings, so City Hall isn't going to be able to knock it down and make it more accessible because it's just not feasible. But what we can do through assistive technology, we can accommodate, we can modify within those smaller things. So AT can often be the door, because then I'm not relying on you or somebody else to do it. I have my own tools. There's that self-accommodation. There's that, I can't expect society to bow or bend to me. Well, screw it. I got the stuff that I need, and I will meet society in all the places where I need to go. So again, it's attitudinal, but then also looking at design, because part of it is education. Knowing where these things are, publicizing that. If your offices, as service providers, if you have accommodations, or if you have technology, or if you have these things, let people know. When you come to Independence First, we have a resource center with over 2,200 pieces of assistive technology. When you come into our lobby, here's what you can expect. Here's the way we orient ourselves. So I think that, a lot of this is about that participation, and it is, for me, participation is about the tools. I may or may not need it, but if you come, to the DMV, and if I know beforehand that they don't provide sitting chairs, I'm going to bring my own. So AT is, a huge thing. But one of the things, just to kind of wind out, because it can obviously go, all of this could kind of, this could be weeks of conversations, but one of the things for all of the folks who are participating with this, the question that you should have in your heads are, whether it's for your job, service delivery, or just in your communities, always be asking you, who is this for? What can happen here? Because then by extension, it's, who is this not for? We know that there are people in our community who are blind and low vision, folks who are deaf, folks who rely on mobility equipment, that type of thing. Why are we not seeing them here? Is it a design issue? Is it a social stigma issue? Is it we never told somebody that this is really cool and this is going on? Do people just not know? So like Harlan, talking about some of, his experiences, this thing was created and now we know and we can tell others about it. So it's getting the word out. It's also, again, in that idea of, who you're in the room with. If you see somebody who has a piece of equipment, and obviously there's tact involved, you just don't go running up and, start investigating, have those conversations. What is that like? How is that? Or that's really cool. Where did you get it? Because again, we're talking about us as consumers or participants in society, but tech is the equalizer, and just getting out of this idea that it's disability related. It should be across the board. We use tech, we use design, and if you think about the places or the places that you want to be or the things that you want to do, what enhances that experience? Well, having a basketball that has air in it is a good place to start. Having places that are accessible, that are built for the activity that you want to do, and just kind of expanding that model, because it is a way of thinking about the world, not only for people externally, but then also for people with disabilities, because it shouldn't be, oh, poor me, or I'm being victimized. Here's the tools, pick it up and let's go, and that type of thing. And, obviously our society can be pretty coercive with the way it commodifies people, but we can change that mindset. And once you do, you're going to build that advocacy, you're going to change those policies. And, if I can say, here's this little thing, yeah, the world sucks, but here's how it could be, follow me. Or again, with the work that Damien is doing, Denise is doing, what Harlan's experiencing, like with that, it's follow me, that there can be better, and getting people to expect that. And technology helps us do that. The one last thing that I'll say about technology is it should never be, well, just check the website. Dude, the reason why I'm here is because I checked the website and I want to deal with a person. For me, and the way my brain works, this isn't really good for me. I don't feel like I'm engaged, or that. Sometimes social media can make me feel lonely, or more disconnected, because it's a wash. So understanding that different opportunities to participate. Obviously, if I'm out rural and I can be involved in a gaming, thing, it does broaden my world, because I can meet with people internationally and all that. But sometimes being in a room with an actual live person can be helpful too. So looking at those different avenues, if it's tech, personal tech, if it's connected tech, great. But also realizing that that's just not the answer. Oh, just get somebody a tablet and they're good. No, that you really need to look at what the thing is. Is it for connection? Is it for opportunity? Or is it just about the tech? DVR, cool, thanks. I gave them a computer. Didn't show them how to use it. Didn't show them what it's for. Technology in and of itself doesn't do anything. It really has to be, it is the tool that gets you to be voting, educating, having fun, and that type of stuff. So there should be a frame there, with that. So it's always going to be about the stuff.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you, Gerald. And I will say, yeah, if you're in the Milwaukee area, I would second like stopping by Independence First to check out all the amazing assistive technology they have there. A lot of good stuff. Well, thank you. I think that's all the questions I had for this morning. Susan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, now we have some time for questions for our panelists. So feel free to either come off mute and ask, or throw those in the chat, and I'll maybe get the ball rolling. Harlan, I have a question for you. There's been a lot of conversation today about accessibility, and I know that the Juneau County Men's Shed, and I don't know where you're at in the process with that, but there's a new building to make it more accessible. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Or I know Abby is off screen next to you. Maybe you guys can tag team that question, and kind of how that's working for the men in the Men's Shed where you are.
You want me to answer that?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I am off screen. Hi. Yes, so the new building will be more accessible. I mean, even coming down to widening the doors, having bigger bathrooms, and everything being more ADA compliant. So being more thoughtful on not just the aging side of things and how we can be more accommodating in that regard. Space as well, for having space for equipment. We do have individuals who are attending already who are in wheelchairs or using adaptive equipment. And so it's not the easiest right now, but we don't want that to hinder anyone or turn people off from coming. And so being very, very mindful of that. So we have kept that in mind very much and have received input on that, which has been very helpful too.
Thank you. Any questions for any of the panelists? I saw some great comments in the chat. A couple things that stuck with me from what you all said were eventually we're all going to need this greater access. So this universal community design, it makes sense. And we'll either know these people or we're going to be these people. So I think everyone knows someone who is an older adult. Everyone knows someone who has a disability. So really appreciate all the things that you all have shared so far. Question in the chat for you, Damian. What type of data is being collected for Bradford Beach and increased attendance or users of the beach?
So the Bradford Beach will check out the chairs for free to people. So they kind of gather who's checking them out and the number of people. I will say what's really interesting is because of the success of the marketing of Visit Milwaukee, I think we see more travel visitors with disabilities to Bradford Beach than we do see the community. So the idea of how do we market, right? Visit Milwaukee or your Visitors Bureau destinations have marketing budgets, and that's what they're for, to bring people into your cities. But nonprofits generally are pushed against marketing and that kind of budget and that kind of cost. So we don't have the same capacity to get it out locally as much as I think we'd all like to and we need to, so that people know. I think we still live in a society, if you will, of people who just think, well, it's probably not accessible, so I'm not going to go. 95% of the time, they're probably right. And so again, we have this idea that we don't think they can do it or want to do it because we don't see them, but that's not the point. It's largely, we have to change an entire culture to understand it's accessible. So I think we see roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 people annually down at Bradford Beach checking out the chairs. But we haven't really stuck with, like, again, what are the metrics, what are the measurements, what are the outcomes? We know people with disabilities deserve the opportunity, so we put the opportunity there, and we're all about, I think what separates, again, what we do a little bit is it's about, if it's open for people, for the able-bodied public, then it should be open for people with disabilities. So we're not there handing you the equipment, checking it out for you. You know, your experience as an individual with disability should be the same experience as the able-bodied public. So we try to avoid things being, what I'll call cumbersome or different. We want it to be as much of the same as possible and kind of seamless.
Thank you. Good question. Other questions? I'm not seeing any. Any of the panelists would like to share any maybe last minute thoughts or experiences on the work that you all do, or the experiences that you have and how that's impacted social connection? Feel free to do that. Well, I'll share my screen and wrap us up as well. So today is the second to last day of Social Connection Awareness Week in Wisconsin. We do have our fun little bingo activity. If you haven't participated, you can find the link on our website to print off our bingo card, and we encourage you to get at least one bingo within this week or even beyond this week, and share how you participated in our bingo activity. And then if you're interested in getting more involved, if you're not already, we encourage you to join the Wisconsin Coalition for Social Connection. We have our website that you can find our join link on. We have a couple of different committees that are participating in different activities and projects to impact social connection for older adults and people with disabilities. And then you can always reach out to if you have any questions or want to get more involved. All right, I'm not seeing any questions that popped up. Any last minute words from anyone?
Thank you for the time and the opportunity.
All right, well, thanks everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you next year for Social Connection Awareness Week. Bye everyone.